neighbors who has come forward to want to share her expertise. I'm going to tell you a little bit about her, but when I went up to go over the slides and I was talking with her husband, I said, okay, Karen, now tell me a little bit about yourself so I can share it with our neighbors, because not everybody knows you. And you know what her husband said? Well, let's start with the word perfect. I mean, really? What a man. So, Karen has such an extensive
So what you're saying is
Use
he's
your
well
mic.
trained.
Use the microphone. Use the microphone.
Oh, okay, she will use the microphone, it's on her body. If I yell, can you hear? Is this okay?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
better.
so she went to U of H, Graduate School of Social Work. She had a very special scholarship in gerontologic studies. She is an LCSW, a licensed clinical social worker, as well as a national addiction counselor. She did 4 internships, including Alzheimer's. She also worked with Houston City Council with seniors. She attended the White House Conference on Aging, and one of the originators of this was also a part of that. She worked for 30 years in clinical social work, concurrently with 20 years in addiction counseling, and she directed the substance abuse program at Houston, the HCA, Gulf Pines, as well as the outpatient psychiatry department. She retired in 2017, and she's married, and like many of us, she has a blended family, 8 children, 15 grandchildren. So we are so happy to have Karen here. Whoops. Speaking about grandparents today, and let me turn the button on. It's like data. You're live.
Am I live? Oh, yes. All right, well, the first thing I'd like to say is thank y'all so much for coming. And I do want to point out that this is not just another Hallmark holiday, which was the first kind of comment a guy made to me years ago when we were talking about another Hallmark holiday. It really is not. And I want to tell you a little bit about how it came to be. It came through the hard work of 2 very passionate people, but independently, one in the Bronx and one in West Virginia. Jacob Ringgold was in the Bronx. He was born in a part of Russia that today is Poland. And he came over here in 1936, and by 1943, he had a master's degree from Case Western.
Next slide button.
Are you sure? Oh, okay, there they are. Early in his career, he founded a little reception center for German orphans that came over from World War II. He attended his first White House Conference on Aging, 1961, I think, and he was moved, so much moved by this conference, especially them talking about the new image of aging. He began his quest for a national observance of older people, and he developed what are called staged options for living. This approach allowed people to continue living at home, or to move into assisted living, or to move into full care as their needs changed. He ran for 40 years. He was executive director in the Bronx of what's called the Hebrew Home. And he developed all kinds of wonderful things, which I think we would recognize today. In his center, he included a workshop, woodworking shop, with safe tools for the elderly men to use. And he brought in a massive collection of worldwide art. That the place was, I'm told the place was beautiful. He expanded the physical fitness activities. And listen to this, he drew up what was put into effect, what has been called the first sexual policy and procedure in a long-term care establishment in the United States. Now, I get the policy, I don't get the procedure. If that sounds familiar, it is a forebear of Eagles Trace. If you would remember, it is a place for people to come, and it will adjust to their individual needs. He died at 83 years old. Marion was a pig. Marion, she was let's say 15 children. She married she graduated from high school, and then she was going on to nursing school, but she quickly did a U-turn and went back and married her boyfriend from high school, who was a coal miner. And she became campaigning for grandparent rights. She just wanted to see that the grandparents in the family had some kind of love and recognition. In September 1978, no, I don't want to say that. She remained adamant that Grandparents' Day be about handmade gifts or personal gifts and not become commercialized and not have, I don't want something from a Walgreens on Grandparents' Day. I'd rather have a little note that they wrote me or something. Her aim was to alleviate loneliness in the elderly. She began campaign letters and calls to so many states and so many areas and couldn't get it to happen. In 1971, she went to the West Virginia Commission and White House on the Conference on Aging, and she asked her senator to submit a bill for a holiday in West Virginia, and he did. There was he put the holiday for Grandparents' Day in West Virginia. In 1978, I love this. 1978, her phone rang, and it was the office of the President, Jimmy Carter. And Carter said, we're going to start a Grandparents' Day nationally because of your efforts. It's going to be the second Sunday in September, and we're going to start this year. And she was beyond excited. She really loved it, and she remained there with her family. She died in 2008 at 91 of heart failure in a nursing home. She had 15 children and 43 grandchildren. It sounds a little like a coal miner. It sounds like Loretta Lynn's. How many people in here are grandparents? How many people are great-grandparents? Okay. Well, does anybody have one grandchild? Just one? Okay. Who thinks they have the most? Okay. 20? Great-grands? Oh my Lord, Christmas time at your place must be amazing. I'm feeling good about 15 grandchildren, but anyway. Okay. Then you all know that grandparenting is not just this easy little road, like a fairy tale, that some people want it to be. It has challenges. And when Marion was doing her work, she was unknown to her, there was a 9-year-old who was campaigning for Grandparents' Day. He wrote to President Nixon and he wanted a grandparent day for his grandparents. And in 1969, Nixon's secretary wrote back, and it's right there where you can see it. Dear Russell, thank you for your letter to President Nixon. Your suggestion regarding a Grandparents' Day is appreciated, but the President ordinarily issues proclamations designated periods of special observance only when a congressional resolution authorizes him to do so. With best wishes, Rosemary Woods. That was in 69, so I kind of jumped when I said in 1978, President Carter said, let's do it. So, he did it. So she has been an advocate for so long. This is a little bit about President Carter. The statute said we want to do this to honor grandparents, to give grandparents an opportunity to show their love for their children's children, and to help children, this is most important to me, help children become aware of strength, information, and guidance older people can offer. I know that you have heard that the United States is suffering these days with an epidemic of loneliness. And I know that it is very common. I've worked with grandparents for so many years, and it is very common for grandparents to feel forgotten, to feel left out. Holidays come and go, they don't get an invitation. It's the kids' first day of school, but they don't call and tell them how it went. And grandparents, it's not always easy being a grandparent. And when you're a new grandparent, it's very easy to step over that boundary your adult children have just developed that you don't know about. And before you know it, there's a dust up and you're in trouble. And you have to unwind your way out of that. You know, it's just not an easy job. We're going to focus a little bit on that this afternoon. But I just want to thank you for coming and being here. My grandchildren are very special to me, and they are older. And we actually have a new one coming in October. Yes, we have a new baby girl coming in October to add to the 15. So we'll see how that goes. And we're going to talk about some things to not do. So 67 to 70 million people in America are grandparents. The average age is 67. Each month, 75,000 Americans become grandparents. Now this astounds me. Less than half of Americans know the name of all four of their grandparents. Does that surprise anybody? It surprises me to pieces that they really don't know the full name of four grandparents. Grandparents and great-grandparents, I think, are more important today than they have ever been. So along with that, we're going to talk about how to do things not right, but in a way that works, that will work best as a grandparent. And we're going to talk about the fact that your relationship with your adult children will determine attitude and access. It will determine your access. More than a few grandparents have gotten crossways with their adult children and been told they're not going to see the kids. Just leave us all alone. That is incredibly heartbreaking. Our children's attitudes expressed toward us, if expressed to their children, will exert a huge influence on how grandchildren feel about us. We want involvement. We don't want interference, and we're going to talk about the definition of interference. Let me say two things. I'll just go ahead now. We've got a number of friends, but I've got two friends who probably 25, 30 years ago sued their children for custody of their grandchildren. That is not unheard of. But the first one, their daughter was an addict and she was living on the streets in New Orleans. And a dealer called them in the middle of the night. They lived over here in Garden Oaks. And said, I have this kid. He was an infant. I have this kid, and if you want him, you better come get him, because if you don't, I'm selling him. He'll be gone in half an hour. Needless to say, they jumped out of their bed. They went flying over there. They got this baby. They brought him home, and they raised him to adulthood. Their daughter never really got straight. She would get straight for periods of time, and when she was like that, they would welcome her for like Thanksgiving and Christmas, but if she wasn't straight, they kept the child away from her. That little boy is now a physician in the medical center and has a very healthy, happy life. The other one was similar to that, and it's nice to watch what happens because her husband died before the end of last year. And those children, her grandchildren, they live with her still. And they're in high school, one of them's grown, and they just absolutely adore and worship their grandmother. I can't imagine how she'd be getting through all the things she has to do right now if she wasn't surrounded with love. But those are not common occurrences, as my lawyer husband will tell you. Grandparent rights is a whole issue nationally. It's seen different kind of in every state, so that's not the average, but it has been done. It's being done more and more as the addiction, especially the opiate addiction, takes people in around the country. So here we have some helpful guidelines. Don't parent your grandchildren. Everybody know what that means? If you don't know what one of those means, please yell at me. Don't parent them. They've got parents. Don't usurp parental authority. Now what that one kind of means is, if they tell you that Johnny cannot have ice cream before dinner, don't give Johnny ice cream before dinner. Isn't that simple? A lot of parents don't do, I want him to have ice cream, he can have ice cream when he's with his granny. No. Criticize the parents in public. Now, I know, just statistically, there are people in here who've had this done to them. And we want to be careful not to pass that on. We just don't want to criticize their parents in front of anybody. And don't one-up the parents in love. Let me tell you what this one is. This is when you take the children into the living room. There's a big family event going on. And you work them. You work them for a while. You give them some toys, you give them some candy and all this. And then you take them back into the room with all the parents and you say, who do you love best, Grammy or Mommy? What do you think the kid says? Grammy, you know. Okay, that will get you in hot water. Yeah, let's not do that. The other is determined to keep the past alive. That's a big no-no. No matter how much your son or daughter hurt you, destroyed your heart during their teenage years, no matter what they've done, let it go. Just, it's back there. Let it go. You want to focus on your love and your relationship with them today. Do let them tell the world they're expecting. My last clients had a hard time with this. They were so excited about having a grandchild, they told everybody. Well, the parents hadn't told anybody yet because they didn't want to tell anybody yet, and when they found out, it was, let me just say, a dust-up. As my grandma would say, it was a dust-up. Because that's their news to share. And respect the name they chose for their children. See, I know that gets giggles. I had my oldest niece was a Star Wars fan. And when her children were born, she had a boy and a girl, and guess what she named them? Anakin and Eowyn. And they are, you know, Eowyn's in college today. My son and his wife couldn't figure out what to name their coming little girl. So they are big San Antonio Spurs fans. And they were sitting at a Spurs game, and it came to them. They should name her Parker because their favorite player was Tony Parker. Yeah, so see, it didn't matter what I thought about any of that. It's like, oh, nice. But as a teenager, I don't know if y'all know this, but a lot of grandchildren today, as they're in their teens, are changing their names. I don't know if you know that. A lot of them are suddenly wanting to use their middle name. They don't like their name anymore. Now, when I was 10, I was kind of hoping I was adopted. But they're changing their names. And Parker is not Parker now. Her full name is Parker Chloe. And now she's Chloe. So we go along with Chloe. She's a beautiful ballerina, by the way. Don't try to be Dr. Spock. Things have changed since we were parents. Okay? Don't stand there and give them all this advice because it's not good anymore. I don't know if y'all remember how it was. Keep the baby, make the baby sleep on his back, make him sleep on his side, make him sleep on his tongue. Nobody could figure out anything. Everybody just said. And some of you like me may have had bumpers in your baby beds and little toys and stuffed animals, and they're like, no, we're going to suffocate your child. So they can't have any of that now. They don't have it. So there goes the gift list, but ask before you buy anything significant for that child. I had a young couple who went to baptize their baby, and the mother-in-law showed up at the ceremony with a gorgeous handmade white satin christening gown. Well, the baby was already in a white christening gown that her paternal grandmother had made and had been in the family for decades. So I always say, ask before you buy, especially something simple. Now, all grandparents don't listen to that. I remember, this is awful, but I had in-laws way back when in the dark ages that didn't listen to much was said, and she wanted to buy my 2-year-old an organ for Christmas. And I said, no, forget the fact we didn't have room for an organ. Okay, she showed up Christmas morning with an organ. It was not well welcomely received, but you know, she had the organ. So remember that your children set the rules, even if you disagree with them. They get to set the rule about bedtime. We have a lot of young people, parents now, who don't have a bedtime. I don't know if you know that. Kids stay up all night. Kids stay up until they want to go to bed. They set the rule about nap time, bath time, feeding time, clothes, and what is an acceptable toy. I should take a minute here. Excuse me. I should take a minute to tell you that Mattel came out with, and it's awful, so don't, just a messenger. They have come out with anatomically correct grandparent dolls. Somebody tell me why? Somebody tell me what an anatomically correct grandfather doll is? I mean, I really think I don't want to know. You know, I don't think I want to know. So, it's wonderful if you can travel with your grandchildren. This is one of the ways you can build that good relationship. Go to the beach, go to the park, go to the museum that has hands-on exhibits, and camping, or on a cruise. Cruise ships, as you know, have lots of kid activities these days, and they have lots of teenage activities. You know, one of my younger grandchildren just turned 13 2 weeks ago, but since he was at least 10 or younger, his parents, they live in Cyprus, have gotten up once in a while on a weekend, and the three of them drive to Surfside. And they let him play in the water and play on the beach. Well, the sun comes up, and then they go home about 8 o'clock. My son-in-law says that's when the traffic arrives. So they go up there to the beach a couple hours for sunrise in the mornings and let the children play. And nobody else there. Oh, jeez, that was noisy. I have an essential trimmer, some of you do too, but it's taken my voice, so we deal with it as we can. We should push through. Now, if you're going to travel with them, and it's going to be by car, you need to know how to stop disputes in the mud. Who sits in the front seat? Who's touching who? And if by car, stop so the kids can get out and run energy. Let them plan the itinerary, which is really nice if you let them pick where you're going. Pack each child a busy box and snacks that are not messy, and activities and toys without small parts that are likely to get lost between the seats. Tic-tac-toe, the license plate game, and the alphabet game. Has everyone played the license plate game? Yes. See, I see some no's. Okay, that's asking the children to look at the license plates going by on different cars and notice what state they're from. And I think that, that's kind of a smart thing to do to help them realize that there's a bigger world. One of the things I love to do with my grandchildren, even as I got to be teenagers, was doing some, mission work. It is mission work, but doing some food pantry volunteering. Doing some, my husband and I at our church, we take the Christmas presents that, parishioners have donated for children, and we go deliver them. And we go in some pretty hard parts of town. And so I made sure when they were younger to take them with us. You don't need to say anything. They just need to see. The other people don't all live the same way they live. They don't all have houses full of electronics, etc. When they were really young, I would go from here to the University of Houston for class, and I would deliberately get lost and have to go through that area right there by TSU. And again, hard to say anything. My 15-year-old grandson's favorite activity was always helping pack food with Kids Against Hunger. You love doing that. I took one of them on their first little mission activity with the rainbow, and when we used to do the rainbow down in Waterway down in the Galleria. 49 and what? He was 18 months old. But we was having a good time. So, if you have a good relationship with your grandchildren's parents, and I hope pretty much everybody does, cherish it, take care of it. If you don't, do whatever you can to heal it. People say don't get religious. Well, I hope it's not offensive when I say ask God to dissolve any anger. You can do that. You can't change other people, but we can change us and how we feel about it and how we respond to it. And be willing to forgive and let go. As a therapist, we have a lot of activities that would help you understanding to let go. Just put it in your, whatever the pain is, put it in your hands. Hold it really tight. And when you're ready, not until, you let it go. Put it back there. Don't look back, you're not going that way. You're going forward. So, accusation, blame, and resentment are not good tools to have. Anybody in here a long distance grandparent? Got grandparents out of the state? I know you are. Yep. Okay, so the question becomes, how do you maintain a really good grandparent relationship with grandchildren that live out of state or they live out of town? And so, out of the country, I think one of the best teachers I had for this was a Lutheran pastor and his wife, and they were forever getting moved from churches. And the first time, she cried her little heart out leaving her grandchildren. So we came up with a whole lot of ideas. They would talk on the phone, and let me tell you, if you talk on the phone to a child, there's going to be dead spots. There's going to be time where it's silent, and they don't know what they're not saying anything. So if you just don't object to that, just leave it. Cliffhangers. If you don't know what cliffhangers means, there was a couple of famous authors that were really adept at that. But you read them a really exciting story on the phone, and you get almost to the end, and you stop, and you say, we'll finish it next time. They can't wait to call right back. And use the FaceTime. Everybody know how to use FaceTime? If you don't know how to use FaceTime, we'll teach you. Because it is the best way in the world. It's to visit them. You see them right there, and they can see you, and you can talk and throw kisses, and you can even play games. Excuse me. One of my grandfathers I worked with developed his own style of grandparenting his 12-year-old grandson. And he called him, and they got on the phone together, and they stayed on the phone together through the entire World Series baseball games. They stayed on the phone, and they tickled each other back and forth, and they made comments back and forth. And, I just thought, I kept having this picture of them sitting in their living room like this. Well, that was a hit, But they did it, and they did it beautifully, and he loved it. Use the memory. Use the time to keep memories alive. So you can say, do you remember 2 years ago when we went to the beach and you had so much fun? I don't know. Try to help them remember. Invite them to visit you. Ask them what they want to do. Create a place in your house when they visit that is really their own place. It doesn't belong to anybody else. Visit your grandchildren and notice everything. Notice what they're playing with. Notice what they're wearing. Notice what they like to eat. Take lots and lots of pictures of your grandchildren with you in the picture. With you in the picture. So that when you come home, you have pictures of this family. Call regularly, email, stay in contact ever you can, but just like FaceTime, today's the day of texting. And if you don't text them, they're probably not gonna respond. I mean, my grandkids check their email like once every 2 months. I mean, today it's about texting and it's about FaceTime. And if you need any help, if you're one of those, there are plenty of us that will help set you up. Now, these are kind of special issues for grandparents. By the way, I had a lot of people over the years that wanted to share jokes with me about their grandchildren. So I have to tell you a couple because I love them. They're my favorite. So we'll get to this in just a minute. But one of them had a 3-year-old grandchild, almost 4. And they asked him where grandma lived. And he said, my grandma lives at the airport. And they said, what? And he said, yeah, when we want her, we just go get her. And when we're done, we just take her back. You know, I mean, anybody old enough to remember that Arthur Godfrey kids say the darkness is? Well, they're still saying it. Oh, what? You're right, Arlene Leather, of course. Yeah. So somebody said, what do you call having your grandma on speed dial? The granddaughter said, I call it Instagram. My grandpa started walking 5 miles a day when he was 60 years old. Now he's 97 and we have no idea where he is. I mean, I just love it, you know. My grandpa tried so hard to warn everybody that the Titanic was going down. It was going to sink, and everybody ignored him, and he yelled at them 3 more times. Eventually, they got irritated and kicked him out of the movie theater. Oh, I'm sorry. One little girl told me this. She told me this in family meeting. She said, my grandparents bought me so many school supplies, it took me 2 weeks to sharpen the pencils. So, you know, all you have to do is listen to them and get their little perspective on what grandparenting is. And, yeah, they are so sweet. Before we talk about that one, oh, yeah, this is one that one of the grandmothers told me. I thought it was sweet. I was in the bathroom putting on my makeup under the watchful eyes of my young granddaughter, as I've done many times before. And after I applied my lipstick and started to leave, she said, but Grandma, you forgot to kiss the toilet paper goodbye. I will probably never again put on lipstick without thinking about kissing the toilet paper. My young grandson called the other day to wish me happy birthday. He asked me how old I was, and I told him 62. My grandson was quiet for a moment, and then he asked, did you start at 1? This has really got to be one of my favorites. After putting her grandchildren to bed, one grandmother changed into old slacks and a droopy blouse and proceeded to wash her hair. As she heard the children getting more and more rambunctious, her patience grew thin. Finally, she threw a towel around her head and stormed into their room, putting them back to bed with stern warnings. And as she left the room, she heard the 3-year-old say, who was that? Okay, 1 or 2 more. A grandmother was telling her little granddaughter what her own childhood was like. We used to skate outside on a pond. I had a swing made from a tire, and it hung from a tree in our front yard. We rode our pony, we picked wild raspberries in the woods. And the little girl was wide-eyed. She said, well, I sure wish I'd gotten to know you sooner. Well, I'll tell you one with my daughter. When she was mesmerized watching TV, cross-legged one afternoon in the family room. And it was one of those Ben-Hur movies. I don't remember what it was, but it definitely was one of the lions fighting people and all that stuff. And she kind of said it to herself when I would walk through them. She said, Mama, I'm so glad they didn't eat you. I thought, how old do you think I am? Oh my goodness. Well, my grandson was visiting one day when he asked me, Grandma, do you know how you and God are alike? was diligently pounding away on her grandfather's word processor. She told him she was writing a story. And he said, "What's it about?" And she said, "I don't know, I can't read." I had one little girl that's grandma was concerned about whether the granddaughter was learning her colors correctly. So she sat at the table with her and she would point to different colors, like red, blue, yellow, you know. And the little girl was getting them all right. And finally the little girl got really tired, got up, left the room, and said, "Grandma, I really think it's time you try to figure this out yourself." So, I mean, kids are wonderful. They can be so, so sweet and such a joy. There was one little boy, one little grandson who kept asking his grandfather, he said, "How old are you?" And the grandfather said, "I don't know." The little boy said, "Well, look at your underwear. Mine says 4 to 6. They're very helpful about that too, you know. Oh, so anyway, okay. There's hundreds more of those. Special issues for grandparents. This is often what brought them into therapy. When the family is falling apart, and what I mean by that is when your kids are getting a divorce or separating, and they're falling apart, and your grandchildren don't know what's happening. I don't know how many of you came from divorced parents, but my parents divorced when I was 10, and I can tell you that when I said, "Where's Daddy?" after coming in from school, my mother said, "He's never coming back, just go do your homework." That was it. This is why we need loving, nurturing grandparents so much, because grandparents can sit down and say, no matter what happens, "I love you forever," because the children think if Daddy and Mommy quit loving each other, then you might quit loving them. And you have to be very reassuring about, no, my love for you is not going to change. And one grandmother got what I thought was a little stern, but it actually worked with her grandchildren. She said, "Now listen here. You are not the only children in the world whose parents are getting a divorce. Now, you know, and they're all just fine. They all live, nobody dies, and they do just fine." I thought that was a little harsh. But those kids immediately got it. And there was something about hearing that it wasn't just them. It was all these kids across the world could go through this too. And that stabilized it for a lot of those kids. Divorce is unhappy as on a good day. The art of, anybody in here have step-grandparents or, step grandchildren? Any blended families where you're dealing with the
Have what?
step-grandchildren? Grandchildren, do you have stepchildren? Then do they have children? That's a little bit of a landmine too. All you got to remember there is you're not the biological person, just step back. Unless invited. I have a number of them, and I just work on having fun with them. We just have fun, we go places, we do things, and I remember them. Now, one of the things I've done that I've suggested people do is I have one of those little books that you can buy at Hallmark or make yourself, where you're recording all their first day of schools, the spelling competition they won, their swimming ribbons, that kind of thing. You have it all there, and that's been recommended by several child psychiatrists that you do that as a grandparent, and then at their wedding, you give it to them. And it shows, and please include lots of those pictures of you with them, because that's a real turning point for people. When they get married, they turn that corner and they leave the biological family, and you need to remind them that grandma's still here. I have a grandson who's 24, and when he was 22, he got in some serious trouble, and everybody was all over him. And I called him and I said, I don't want to lecture you or say anything to you other than always remember that your granny loves you. And he said, "I always remember that." It was the whole conversation. gerontology in graduate school was because of my grandmother. I had loved her more than anything in the world. She was the stabilizing force in my life through lots of crises. She was loving and wonderful. And my mother, who is not necessarily terribly maternal, left me with her a lot. So Granny was like old grandparents. She was soft and pudgy, and she wore an apron and she cooked all the time. She had scars on her arms from cooking. And she had diabetes, which I didn't know as a kid. But her vision was very, very limited. She could see very little. And so they dropped me off with her. And I loved her more than anything in the entire world. And you know what it was? It was, every morning I'd get up. I know the nutritionists in here are going to faint. But breakfast was a bowl of sugar and butter swirled together. They were very poor. And sometimes there would be a little oatmeal in there. And when she held me on the sofa, she would lay there, I would have my head in her lap, and she would peel oranges. And I will always, the smell of those oranges will always touch my heart. But she was the most wonderful human being on earth. And when I was born and I was toddling around, she told my mother, she said, "She's just beautiful." And mother's thinking, "You can't see." But anyway. And you probably remember this too, but back in the day, and this is where Art Linkletter comes in. He had a Saturday morning dance around the something show, dance around the breakfast table. It was on the radio. And every Saturday morning, Granny would sit on the sofa, I'd lay down with my head in her lap, she'd peel oranges, and she would turn on Dance Around the Breakfast Table. I'm little. I would run into the kitchen and I would prance all around the breakfast table. I would go round and round and round. And we would sing and do things together that were just wonderful. And so loving and so soft and so kind. And I loved her so much. I remember once taking a family trip with my aunt and uncle who didn't get along very well to way up North Texas. And these are all farmers and ranchers. And my aunt and uncle started arguing and fighting in the front seat. And that as soon as they started, Granny started singing gospel music. I was singing with her. We were in the back seat going, "Oh, how I love Jesus," and we're singing like crazy while they're fighting like cats and dogs. But that was the way Granny handled things. You just love and sing and praise God over everything. Just don't go with them where they are. So she was wonderful to me, and because of that incredibly special relationship, she did die of her diabetes in 1963. I was at her bedside. But because of that, when I thought about what I wanted to major in and study in grad school, one of the choices was gerontology. Well, because of her, I had always super loved old people. I just loved them. And everybody else was like, "You." And I was like, "I love them. I just love them." And so for me, it was a natural fit. And so I will always, always, always be grateful for my grandmother. But once we were in grad school and our first professor we had asked that question, how many of you had a grandmother or a grandfather that you just loved so much? Every hand in the room went up. Let me tell you the influence that your love and care and support can be for those children. It can be lifelong. I know it certainly was for me. And I know with there's tricks to it, and I know that people will say the average age for a kid to stop being all about grandma and grandpa and kind of forget about them, the average age is 10. So we have to work past that time to make sure we stay relevant, to make sure we're in contact, to have fun with them. I remember when Jay was little, and I took him, these are fun things that I created to do with mine. I had him write a little letter, 3 years old. He wrote a little letter with his crayon on a piece of paper, put an envelope, put a stamp on it. I took him to the mailbox, and I let him drop it in. And 3 days later, it appeared in his mailbox at his house. And there was magic. But we were teaching him how mail worked. How the post office, does anybody remember the mail? I mean, when email came, handwriting went out the window, letters were gone. And it was just, he was just mesmerized. And it was like the first time I took him to the shopping mall, and we were walking, and he was 3. He suddenly caught sight of the escalator. Granny, those steps are moving! Yeah. I mean, everything is such a delight. It's such a marvel to them. They haven't seen any of this stuff. He could not understand why the stairs were moving. What I liked is I remember being a little kid with my mother in downtown Waco at the department store and getting on the elevator first time. You forget how magical this stuff is to a kid. The door opens and there's a whole other world. And it closes and then it opens again and there's a whole other world. I was just enthralled. I mean, I couldn't wait to go up and down the steps anyway. Okay, the art of step grandparenting really is to just don't talk unless you're asked. It's just be very careful. Now and don't expect a reward. Don't expect a reward. I've seen heads nodding, you know what I mean. You can give your life to a stepchild or to a step-grandchild and be everything in the world that when they grow up, they don't know who you are. That is not unheard of, and it hurts a lot. But just if you're prepared for it, you know that might be an outcome, then you don't get hurt quite so bad. Terminal illnesses and death. Trying to tell a child that the fatherly love more in the entire world than anybody is in bed, he is very sick, he's not going to get well. Or to say that somebody he loves is in the hospital and they're never coming home. These kind of conversations have to be handled with great care, and I'm going to suggest to you that if you get in one of these conversations, you get yourself on Amazon. Get yourself to Barnes & Noble. There are infinite books out there that will help you navigate those kind of emergencies in the family. My niece's husband died at 34 of cancer, and they had 2 little ones. And those kids cried their heart out for I don't even know how long. Weeks. They still miss their daddy, and he died, it's been 10 years, 12 years. But they still miss their daddy, and there's lots of pictures of daddy around the house. But as grandparents, you need to take a step back and just be there and love them. I probably could say that all day long and we could just dismiss. Just be there and love them. And let them know that you love them, especially the grandfathers. Does anybody enjoy listening to music, especially folk music, country music, anything like that? You will know that there was, who was it? Rand Chesney, I think it was Chesney, that made the song, Grandpa, Tell Me About the Good Old Days. And the Judds recorded it right after that. But if you haven't heard that, it is just a beautiful song. And there's another one that Randy Travis made before he lost his voice called, it was about Grandpa's hat. And it's a video too, and it shows Grandpa walking on the farm with his hat and the little one trying to catch up. You will get how important those memories are to children. But I love music, so I play music like that all the time. Ask Gloria, she can often hear me on the other side of the wall because I wake up to music and I dance while I'm getting dressed. And she's like, could you keep it down over there? So family moves and long distance grandparenting. Family moves are difficult. Have y'all ever had to say goodbye to grandchildren when you're moving to a different place? Yeah? Has it gone well and easy, or? I told my daughter when we were getting transferred to North Carolina, and they lived down the street from us, and that was baby Jay with the elevator and the escalator and all that. And I we had him all the time, we spoiled him right, we loved him. And so I made this big production of sitting her and her husband down in the family room one night to tell them that we were being transferred to North Carolina. I didn't even know where North Carolina was. I had to get an atlas out and see where it was. I was born in Texas, never been out of Texas, so that was the beginning of my adventure, knowing that there was a world outside of the Texas boundaries. She responded with, "That's fabulous, Mom! That is so great! Now the kids are going to have this wonderful place to come on summer vacations." So much for missing Mom. So, now we lived there, and we went from there to Chicago and then back here. We made sure that the grandkids traveled, and they flew up to see us all the time. In fact, because of that, they took their first airplane flights with us back and forth. So, long distance grandparents. Grandparenting is amazing. I do want y'all to really do whatever you need to enjoy this Grandparents' Day.
Somehow,
If you put balloons out, give them hugs, kisses, call them. Now, I got to admit I cheat a little bit because I make sure my kids remember. I do. I say, "Oh, Grandparents' Day is coming up." And so I usually get very, very sweet things. One of my little granddaughters, a step-granddaughter up in Washington, D.C., sent me a little picture frame with a picture of she and I in it, and she says, "Me and Grammy." So, I mean, those things are so precious, aren't they? So, that's the story of how Grandparents' Day came to be, to the efforts of Jacob and Marion and little Russell. They worked really hard, and they got us to where we are today. And it is not a Hallmark holiday. It's a holiday fought for. When I was at the White House Conference on Aging, we talked a lot about it. This little 9-year-old boy needed the world to know how wonderful his grandparents were. And he wanted a day when everybody would love them and recognize them. So, I just want to say enjoy Grandparents' Day 2024, and love and cherish and hug and kiss and hold those grandchildren and great-grandchildren if you have them. So, anybody have questions? If not, that's it. Yes, sir.
Can you talk about special needs and neurodivergent grandchildren?
Yes.
Repeat the question.
Yeah. Oh, can we talk about neurodivergent grandchildren? Alan also had disabled grandchildren, Down syndrome grandchildren, challenged. Again, your job is to just gather them and love them and don't criticize them and do what their parents say. Follow their parents' instructions. One family I worked with, Bob was just so, he loved his kids, and they had moved down here to get away from him having to shovel snow in New York. But when his son and daughter, who are still there, had their baby, their last baby, they had 2 or 3 before. This little boy, if you've been here, you know it. He wasn't moving just right. He wasn't crawling. He wasn't doing the things those milestones. He was not meeting them. And so they took him to the doctor and found out that he was autistic. And there was lots of special instructions about what to do with this child and not to do with this child. And they had several specialists that they brought into the system that worked with this little boy. And far as I know, he's doing okay, but the grandparents made it their goal in life to adjust to this grandchild. And they did. And I'm not going to tell you that's easy. One woman said to me, "I've walked through grocery stores and seen Down syndrome children and thought, thank God it's not me." And then suddenly I have a grandchild. My son calls and says, "The baby's got Down syndrome." Oh, yeah. So I'm not by any stretch saying this is easy. But being a good, nurturing, loving grandparent is a little bit like being in a boat that's rocking on the sea. Whatever is going on, you adjust. You adjust and you love, and you hug and you adjust. What's here today is not necessarily here tomorrow. It's just a different world. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that, Jim? It's just, you just love them. Okay. All right, I'm sorry, this is not a rabbit hole, but I do have to tell you, this same family, the crisis I had to deal with these grandparents was there's a 15-year-old girl in that family. And she'd always been their sweetheart growing up, and now that they were coming to visit from Houston, and they were older, and she was 15, and they're sitting there in the family room, and they watch her boyfriend and her go into her bedroom and shut the door. You can imagine. Well, if her parents didn't say anything, you don't say anything. They've worked this out, whatever it is. You're not their parents. The parents, they just wanted to have a major fit right there. But they didn't do. We had to deal with that. They had to learn to let the parents be the parents. As my friend whose husband recently died, she said, Jack and I often talked about the one goal we had was to be nurturing, loving, and supportive and non-judgmental grandparents. And that meant most of the time, we zipped our lips. I hadn't heard that phrase in so long. She said, we zipped our lips. We just didn't. Lots of times we wanted to say something, we just didn't. So again, I hope you all have a wonderful grandparent day. Oh, Pat, hello.
I want to give a little plug.
Okay.
Speaking of grandparents, the Diversity and Belonging Committee is going to invite the residents of Eagles Trace to celebrate their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, their nieces, their nephews, their godchildren, and to decorate your package shelf for the first 2 weeks in September, so that the other residents can walk through the hallways and see your grandchildren. It's a very simple task. Just put it on your shelf.
15 pictures on my shelf. It is this September the 3rd. I'm on the committee. Oh, I can climb up the wall. That's right, I forgot about that. Jorge needs to renew an extension. Thank you, Pat. Thank you for reminding us about that. I know Lori's got pictures all over the place of her two precious grandsons. They're just beautiful. In Africa, that's right. Talk about long distance. Okay, thank you.